unos minutitos. Vamos a dar unos minutitos a que termine de entrar los espectadores y empezamos con nuestro último día de esta Dama Perú Week 2021. Ponemos mientras tanto nuestras cámaras apagadas, ¿vale? Y ahora en un momentillo conectamos y volvemos y empezamos con el evento. Samir, we can show off our cameras. We're about to wait some minutes to
okay.
Get into, okay, and
sure.
We will start in a couple of minutes. Okay.
Perfect.
Bueno, buenos días a todos y bienvenidos al último de nuestros días de fiesta, ¿no? De evento de esta Dama Perú Week 2021, que ha sido, esperamos que una semana bastante provechosa para todos, en la que hoy hemos tenido intervenciones magníficas a lo largo de toda la semana. Y bueno, dicen que el postre se deja para el final, ¿no? En este caso yo creo que hemos dejado el plato principal para el final de la jornada. Tenemos un día, yo creo que muy interesante por delante. Como todos sabéis, la sesión de hoy será en idioma inglés, así que si me permitís, voy a introducir o voy a empezar a dar paso a nuestros ponentes. So if you let me to switch into English, I'd like to, and I said before, we are not waiting for the dessert for the last dish. I think we have the main dish at the end of the week, and it is about data strategy. I think that probably many of you, when thinking about data strategy, you could think that it is a bit fluffy or even a bit gray zone, that you are not very, that many people talk about it, but not many people know what to do about it. So, and I think that today, probably for those of you that may think or may have thought sometimes about data strategy as something not very clear in your companies, I think that probably some of you will have another idea after the day of today. So if you let me, I would like you to present Samir Sharma. Samir is the CEO and founder of Datazuum, a data consultancy specializing in data strategy and analytics. His clients range from medium-sized businesses through to large multinationals. Since 2002, he has been helping organizations create and implement data strategies, focusing on turning data into a strategic business asset. He has experience of working across many verticals, such as retail, media, technology, logistics, postal insurance, banking, telecoms, housing, policy in central and local government. Previous to Datazuum, Samir worked at computer science corporations, Accenture, Christie's, and Vertex Business Services, where he led the development of the data and analytics business. He's the host of the probably broadly known the Data Strategy Show, podcast series, a member of faculty for data strategy at a prestigious PwC Leadership Academy, a regular speaker and panelist at international conferences. He cuts through the complexities of data for audiences, conveying ideas in simple terms and providing clarity. He's also a mentor and youth champion for working knowledge, supporting young people to achieve their personal and career goals in life. Samir lives in London with his wife and daughter. Welcome, Samir. It's our pleasure to have you in here today.
Thank you, Moisés. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
So as everybody knows, now we are delighting a presentation from Samir talking about the duality of the dual data strategy. So I'll speak no more. I give you the voice and the word, Samir. Thank you very much. We all spectating.
Thank you. So I will just share, while I'm sharing my screen, thank you once again, Moisés. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm probably the anomaly here. As Moisés said, I'm from London, but it's great to be in Dama Peru virtually. I have done a number of Dama events around the world, but none in Latin America. So this is my first one. So it's a real pleasure to be with you in the audience and to just give you some thoughts about where we are in terms of data strategy, and hopefully you can see my screen. I think that was the most overused phrase of 2020 and 21. So as Moisés said, data strategy can sometimes be quite an intangible and esoteric subject. Many people will say, well, data strategy, what is it? So for me, it's really interesting. I've seen a number of things, and speaking to a couple of people this morning as well here in London. Actually, they were in the Nordics. There's a dichotomy around data strategy. Many companies that we engage with typically will have a data strategy, and guess what? That data strategy will be very technology driven, because they're looking at storage, they're looking at capacity, they're looking at cloud, they're looking at the movement of data, and a very sort of the plumbing factor, which is fine. It's one part. And the other aspects of where we've seen good data strategies is when people are encompassing the business side, and understanding what value they have to provide out to the business. But essentially, the way that I look at it, and the way that we've looked at it over the number of years that, well, I've had quite a lot of experience in the industry for a number of years, as Moisés said, and I'm not going to dwell on myself. But we've been trading now, well, actually going into our 10th year, and the experiences we've had have led us to believe that not only is data strategy important, but equally the resonating factors from many industry surveys, as we'll go through in a second, a number of opinions that I've recently had from a series of events that I've been hosting and holding with Bill Schmarzo and John Thompson, and equally, with the podcast and speaking to many data leaders, including Iván and others who have come onto the podcast. So it's actually, data strategy, I think, is still in its infancy, which people will probably say, "Oh my goodness, how can that be?" But I think it very much is misplaced. It's in an area where people and companies look at it from a lens of siloed mentality, unfortunately. And the work that we do helps broaden that horizon, helps us switch into how do we start to see the specific data strategy as an enterprise-wide initiative, and how do we start to really drive out value for the business. And that's what it's all about. It's about business outcomes. It's not about technology. It's not about anything else. It's about business outcomes linked with technology, linked with culture first, linked with the technology later, and the data's there. So I really don't think that we should be worried so much about data. I think we should be worried more about how much value that we're generating for the business. And I think that's the crux of it. We can implement data meshes, data lakes, data fabrics. We can have those coming out of our ears, but if we're not delivering front and center to that business, those business drivers, then we've got a real issue. And that's what I see basically with a lot of companies that we deal with. These are some of our clients globally. But what I wanted to do is just set the scene very quickly. And I know I've got about 35 minutes with you to take you through my thoughts, but equally, I think at the end, we'll have a bit of about 10 minutes for a Q&A. So, you know, Randy Bean every year does this survey, and they survey normally Fortune 1000 or Fortune 250 companies. Perhaps some of the people on the call and some of the people, your companies have been engaged by Randy Bean and New Venture Partners. But what's interesting for me is that third bullet point. And for many, many years, I have been under the impression, and with my experience, that companies are actually not implementing their data strategies effectively. One, because they miss out the cultural and change management aspect. Two, because they look at it from a technology lens. And three, because they think that it's an easy play. They think that it's very easy to implement a data warehouse or something like that, and therefore it can fix the issue. But there are so many different aspects to this. And what this survey has actually also told me over the years, if you've tracked it over the years, and actually, you know, that would be a good thing to do, but the numbers are going down. So the percentages are decreasing in terms of effectiveness across businesses, across industries. And these are not small companies. These are very large, as I said, Fortune 250 to 1000 companies. They have large revenues, typically over $1 billion, and they are not doing well within the context of data. So we can see that even to the point that only 39.3% are managing data as a business asset. Now that's down from 50%, which is, you would think that it would be going upwards. And that means there's an issue in the industry. That means there's a real problem with how we're delivering data initiatives, how we're treating the asset that we should be treating very carefully, and how we're not attacking the issue from a people, process, organization, and change management perspective. Now, that's very strange for a data guy to say, right? I'm a data guy. I'm actually a business strategist to start with, but I have fundamentally taken data as the driver for a lot of transformation and change. But when I sit down and talk to CEOs or even CDOs, that the first thing I talk to them is about the cultural practices of the organization, and they think I'm stark raving mad. So why would you talk about culture as opposed to data? Well, data is there. I want to talk about how people operate, how people work, what's effective, what's not effective, how essentially the fabric of the culture can onboard new ideas, new sort of mind shift changes. So this is what is important to think about when we start to do any kind of data strategy, when we want to roll out a new initiative, when we have to think about the entire process. It's an enterprise-wide aspect. We need to think about what are we absolutely attempting to achieve from a business outcome perspective. So I'm not going to talk to all those areas, but this is basically where I've seen things happen. And I'll give you a short case study a little bit later about one of our clients. But this is what I really see in the business, and it still happens. And I don't know why it happens. I don't know why there's a miscommunication or a mismatch between the sort of three-legged stool: the IT, the data teams, and the business teams. I was with a client now who's a US client, and we were interviewing their operations teams. They're a very large not-for-profit organization, but they have a profit arm as well. And the operations teams were saying, well, we want data and we want it now. So the demand goes to the IT team, who's only 2 to 3 people in this very large organization, which has revenues of, almost 1.6 billion. And you'd think that there's a larger team that would be dedicated to absolutely helping, forming and understanding the data direction and how that's going to help the business to drive their behaviors and drive the revenues and drive the efficiencies. But actually, when you've got 2 people just tasked at looking at data, and then you've got a whole bunch of technical people involved in making sure that data is secure and, you know, it's being delivered into the right areas or into the right systems, but not well laid out, no real governance, no quality, and so on. But the demand from the business is, give me the data I need and I'll do whatever I want with it. So I often find that there's two aspects of that. There's one on the sort of business side, and there's another aspect on the data side as well. Well, I'll just, you know, find out what I can from this piece of data and hope it hits some kind of insight. Now, if we start with the data, as you see here, you know, we've got this data, we've got a huge amount of data, and we want to try and get to some information, and we want to try and get some business questions out of that. We want to try and get some, you know, wisdom and insights, and we want to start taking action. But as you see, what happens is this becomes a real difficult play, because as organizations, attacking a data first principle is not the right way to go. Now think about that, a data first principle. We often say that we want to be data driven, which I don't really think is the best term to use. And, or, you know, orchestrating it in a way that looks at the data first, I wouldn't say that that's a sensible thing to do. So as you can see here, it's probably slow. You're trying to look for a needle in a haystack. It's expensive going after the data. We must have all the data before we start doing our analysis. And it often becomes analysis paralysis. So, you know, we see a lot of data scientists, you know, working on algorithms, not being able to productionize them, not being able to get the right insights out, not being able to convey that information to the end customer, that user, the business teams. What does it need to do? What actions? Because it's not linked to a specific aspect or variable, which is really the business strategy. So the way that we look at this and the way that we identify where we need to get to is by flipping it, just by saying, hey, guys, before you start, you might be technologists, you might be, you know, data architects, you might be data scientists, you might be really wanting to get your hands on the data, but you need to find out, what is this business problem? What is the strategic objective that you're trying to arrive at? You know, every company, and this is the business strategy in me, strategist in me, which every company has specifically, you know, business strategies, goals or objectives, whatever they're trying to do for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years. Is it grow their revenue by X%? Is it, you know, acquire customers by X%? Is it to decrease churn by, you know, a certain percentage? Is it to become more efficient than cost savings and process efficiencies internally? So these are the real drivers that we want to latch onto. You know, even if we are, you know, designing data models for a data platform, we fundamentally need to know why we're doing that. And this is the why. So, you know, before we absolutely start working on any kind of data initiative, we've got to start with these strategic objectives. Why do we need them? What are we doing? What are we trying to achieve? What are the outcomes? And then we can see, well, based on those strategic objectives, what kind of actions do we need to take? What kind of decisions, you know, need to be taken in terms of investment decisions or process changes, or hiring more people, you know, and what kind of business questions are we trying to attract? What are we trying to build out of this? What are we trying to respond to? And then, you know, then we can go and find the data, because now we're really pinpointing what we need to get to. And this is the case study that I'm going to get to in a second. But before that, I really wanted to show you this model. Now, you know, it is a model. I talk about offensive and defensive. I talk about dual data strategies. I do this because many people start in one place or the other. And I just call out the defensive and offensive, not to say that one can only be done in a defensive way. But again, the principles behind this, we must be able to connect to a business strategy. Now, all of you work in, you know, businesses that are either highly regulated, or they've got some growth objectives, or they've got some customer objectives or product objectives, or they need to create efficiencies. So this, I would say, is the typical things that most customers are doing. You know, we work in the housing industry, and the housing industry in the UK is very heavily regulated. So every single thing that we need to do with data has to go through a real thought process about how we're going to provide that data out to the regulator, equally with insurance companies, working with a debt management company right now who absolutely needs to, respond to FCA protocols in the UK, and has the need to design their processes in such a way that someone can come in and audit them. So, even in the US, the IRS, it acts as the main charity commission in the US, so they have to be on point. And our client there has to understand how to respond to any kind of requests for data or reporting or insight into what they're doing. And so that's important, right? It is a defensive issue, but it all equally could be an offensive issue to make sure we get it right. But these are the four main categories that I typically see. Now, the glue that I see is really between the data strategy and the business strategy. How do we align that? How do we start to couple the two together to drive out what we're going to be doing in these defensive and offensive? And I just group them nicely, because most people will ask me, what do you mean by data governance? What do you mean by data architecture? How do we bring those principles together? Now, I lump them together in the defensive side, because typically that's where we start sometimes from a data strategy perspective, is trying to lay the foundations, trying to make sure that governance is placed in while we're trying to drive out use cases, which could be from an offensive, have an offensive desire, but making sure that we are playing both sides and ensuring that they speak to each other, rather than just delaying the value piece and just working on the foundations continuously. But here are the important things that I feel data strategies miss out on. One is this operating and engagement model. And what do I mean by that? If we are putting in centers of excellences, or if we're putting in some kind of hub and spoke model or federated view, we've got to have real principles behind that. Design principles, consistency. We need to have consistent KPIs, metrics. We need to have consistent data. We need to, if we're going to a self-serve model, how do we know that people aren't taking that data and doing something else with it? So we've got to have the right, protocols in place, the right guardrails, the right governance, and ensuring that we can absolutely start to speak the same language as the business. Now, the engagement model just doesn't mean that I am coming to you and asking you a question. It's a criteria-based view, which says, okay, if you've got something that you need to get, what's the business problem? What's the business question? How do we, engage with you on that level? How do we really know that that is the business question that you're trying to get to? And therefore, you go through a series of, specific design workshops, design thinking. Is it customer driven? Is it internally driven? Is it employee driven? And how do we start to build that out in such a way that we can get the SME knowledge coupled with the technology and the data knowledge, and then build something that actually makes sense for the business? So from an operating standpoint, we need to make sure that we've got clear protocols, clear standards, clear practices, but we've got to set up a framework in order for everybody to speak to each other in a way that makes sense. And it's not technically driven. It's, the business standard, which could be, in this case could be Spanish, but, it's got business definition behind it. And then often what's left out is the people and culture piece, because regardless of whatever technologies we put in, we still need people to drive that. We still need the cultural practices in the ways of working. And as an organization over the years, we've there's the typical thing that we do when we go in and do a data strategy is we will help and uncover the absolute maturity angle of the organization. That's one of the first things that we do. What is the data maturity? But the second thing that we do aligned with that is something we've built over the years. It's a cultural model. And that is all looking at culture through the lens of data. And it complements the data maturity assessment, because it helps us understand, what is the leadership thinking about this? What are the processes that are involved in the ways of working? How are people absolutely being, getting data fluent in the organization? How are we absolutely engaging with each other on a communication level? How do we work within projects and programs? So it looks at it through the data lens, which gives another view of how instrumental culture is going to impact any kind of successful data initiative. So people and culture is absolutely key here as well. And the change management area is often overlooked because change management, as we know, is difficult. And it's not an easy thing. So whenever we build a roadmap, whenever we start to think about what the, we understand absolutely what the use cases are, we start to build out what the metrics are in the organization, we start to fundamentally understand, what governance practices that are required, where they want to get to within their operating model. But how do they really change? How do they start to move the mindsets from one area of how we do stuff now to this new way of working? So we have a change management angle in the roadmap where we build out that whole view, working with the internal teams, the change teams. Sometimes they aren't there. So we absolutely have to spin up those cultural teams and those change management teams to help implement the data practices, the new ways of working. And I'm not talking about a data culture here. Many of you may work in the context of a data culture. I don't believe there is a data culture. I believe that there is a culture of an organization, and we work within the context of that culture, and we help infuse data into that particular culture. So, from my standpoint, the areas within the, the BI and analytics, the monetization and the innovation will arrive. We will get there. We need to have a cross between all of this. So data governance doesn't mean that we can't do any kind of advanced analytics. It supports it. It helps us get there. Architecture to ensure that we've got the right, plumbing in place to manage all of that data to the endpoint, make sure it's productionized, make sure it can get to a system. Data privacy, absolutely, for our customers, which we might need for innovation. So it doesn't mean that if we're doing data privacy and, we have to adhere to certain guidelines, that we can't be innovative about it. And monetization, insights monetization, not data monetization. You don't monetize data, you monetize insights. So for me, this is an important framework. This is how I introduce data strategy to a board, and it helps them actually realize what they're missing within their business. But I'm going to give you the context now and very quickly go through a specific case study of one of our clients, which will be interesting from a perspective of what I've laid out right now, but how we took them through going from not having a data strategy to building out what we might include in the offensive and the defensive, but how they melded together and how we get value early. This is not just about a theoretical based data strategy. This is about a real live data strategy, which your data strategy should always be. It shouldn't be in a document with 300 pages sitting on a shelf gathering dust. It should absolutely be embedded within the way that the business moves and pivots. If the business moves and pivots into a new industry or into a new sector or looking at a new segment of customer, you need to dynamically move your data strategy with that, because that's why it's pinned to the actual business strategy. It's key in that sense. So this was a global publishing company. And interestingly enough, we were engaged by the head of customer intelligence to really, and I'll get to that. It's a bit of a cheeky slide, but I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, the challenges here were, look, magazines, physical magazines were being replaced by digital products. So they were in an intense competitive environment. They didn't have much intelligence on customers. Their marketing teams were attempting to sort of pray and spray, what we call a pray and spray marketing. Let's just, spray out marketing to everybody and pray that somebody will convert and buy some stuff. They didn't really have an organization set up around data and real, no executive leadership was really in place to drive out the priorities and really fund initiatives. So it was very much, getting a plaster and putting it on the actual problem and hoping that, blood doesn't spurt out again when you've got to start patching it up. So running on a real limited budget. So the customer, the head of customer intelligence said to me, we don't know anything about our customers. Just go find some insights. I bet you've heard that before, haven't you? So as per usual, we said, oh yeah, sure, we can do that. But hey, why don't we start to absolutely develop this thing in a different way? Firstly, as I said, we did the data maturity assessment. We looked at where they were. And we've come quite far with them now in terms of their processes, their data board, how they absolutely monetize that insight, how they drive out better marketing. But we'll come to those things. So just looking at where they were and really taking them from a very low level of maturity, getting to a higher level in some cases, and staying very much below. You don't necessarily need to be in the 4s or 5s. You can be in the 3s, 3.5s, but making sure we can set the benchmark and measuring the progress as they go along. But essentially we said to them, well, yeah, we can get the data and we can look at the stuff, but what about some key business questions here? So this is the thing that I often ask people, what are your top 3, 5 business questions that you would be identifying in your area that are absolutely key for you? And in this instance, when we sat him and his team down and they said, okay, well, we really want to know what our customers are made up of. Okay, so, it sounds like you want to know a little bit more about the segments of your customers. And then, we'd say, well, we'd like to know a bit of their behaviors and what are they buying with us? Do they buy seasonally? How much money do they spend with us? And then an interesting question came up as we were talking about money. And it was about, how much money are we leaving on the table? So it was an interesting aspect because they hadn't really thought about that. It was a question that we'd put in the mix, that how do we start to think about data and in a way that is more business focused? And actually, how do we start to uncover issues in your business that will help data drive outcomes? So this was one of the things. And then they said, yeah, that's great. These are the 3 kinds of business questions that we'd really like to look at. I said, but that's fine. But what are you going to do if you find out the answers to those questions? Scratching of heads, kind of looking around. What do you mean, Samir? So, then we sort of said, well, actually, if we find these things out for you, you'll have a better understanding of who you need to target. And your marketing teams will know where to target, what messaging to give them, what types of content works for them. Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Well, we need. I said, what about, right now you do a lot of spray and pray. What about the fact that your CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, will want to know where she puts her investment? Okay, so we're now starting to go, beyond the realms of this customer intelligence team, and we're starting to broker conversations with a wider audience. And that audience is the CMO, who's got an executive position, who now starts to drive out budget, who starts to drive out investments. And, what about just looking at people and thinking about how we can decide to, what we might want to cross-sell, upsell to them? Oh, okay, interesting. We've got we might have a way of doing that. So linking the questions to the decisions is supremely important. Otherwise, there's no point in just asking a business question, because if we don't know what we're going to decide upon that outcome, then there's no good. But the next thing is, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead. Well, hang on. What kind of source systems are we talking about? Where's the data? We need to absolutely understand, if you've got data, where is it? But equally, do you have any external data that we could layer in? Or do we need to go and source that? Because we might need to build better profiles for those individuals and really understand what's going on. So, these are the kinds of systems that we went to. So we're being more targeted. We're being more specific. We know it's customer data. We know it's email marketing. We know it's financial transactional data. We need to know what products that we're looking at. And we need to know whether we can layer and enrich that kind of data. So we're building up now a profile. And this wasn't done in a 5-6 month period. This was done in a very quick turnaround. So now we know what the data inputs are. But then I wanted to know, well, who are your consumers? Apart from it's you guys aren't going to be the ones. So let's widen this remit. Let's start to show what we're doing to not only your team, to the marketing teams, of course, because they are worried about conversion, they're worried about revenue, they're worried about building that funnel. So also, what about the CEO? The CEO needs to know what's happening. The CFO Absolutely. Really needs to understand whether they're driving out revenue and whether we're getting, our return for the cost that's been, the investment that's been incurred. And, more importantly, let's get this back up to the board, because if the board doesn't know this stuff, if the board doesn't know what's happening, and if the board doesn't know that we can absolutely impact the types of work that you're doing through data, then, no one's really going to give you any money. You're going to be begging all the time. So, but here was the issue. We had 2 weeks to go away and do some analysis on this. 2 weeks. And this is what I mean. When we do data strategy, when we absolutely embed some kind of principles into the business, it's not just a list of things. We are absolutely trying to drive out value, and proof of value is an important factor here. So when we don't do proof of concepts, we don't do MVPs, we build proof of value. So that is absolutely taking an area which we can see through speaking to the business, uncovering the use cases, looking at the prioritization, applying criteria to that and saying, right, I think we found a place that we can absolutely look at. And we do a data discovery to find out whether we've got some good data there. So it just happened that we had good data here. This was probably the best use case to go after. So we decided, okay, but we were given limited time because they had an executive meeting and they wanted to get to that board and they wanted to show them what they'd got. So very quickly, we started to uncover their segments. So what's really interesting here is we gave them their profiles. We aged the customer to understand how long the customer had been with them, how loyal they were, and started to understand and uncover lifetime value. And boy, was that a real eye-opener for them. They had a huge amount of customers. In this case, 1.5 million. Yeah, but most of those, up to 1 million of those, just above, were absolutely in a mode of sleeping. These are the categories we applied. Actually, the data scientists applied. So they were sleeping. They weren't doing any activity. They've been sleeping for this long. A few cheeky, things around, they're sleeping. They're never going to buy from you. They went a long time ago. But then we had, hey, look, there's some people who are falling into an area which you might want to look at them. And there's an alert here. These people are going to go very soon and they're going to go into this sleeping category. So actually, we've uncovered some intelligence. We understand that you've got a real big issue here with your customers. But over here on the left-hand side, okay, we've got some interesting stuff. We've got, 150,000 new customers. We've got some real stars, those VIPs, but we've got some candidates here, VIP candidates, actually sliding because you're not doing much with them. So why aren't you paying attention to these people here? And why aren't you trying to think about trying to get, these people who are churning, people who are going to leave us, why don't we try and do something different to them in terms of intervention? So this becomes more specific. This becomes, how do we start to target people in a better way, responding to those decisions? How do we start to understand and uncover what the value is behind this? And so we said, okay, that's really nice. That shows you that you've got a really big problem in terms of aging customers and people who are active across your value chain. But equally, we can see that there's a lot of people who don't really get into this area here. One-time purchases are great, but what's a one-time purchase if you can't upsell, if you can't cross-sell? Loyal isn't so bad, but there's a little bit of a problem here as well. So why don't we get down to some of the micro segments? So as we started to uncover what the micro segments are, you can start to see the numbers dipping really poorly. You can start to see how much investment they were spending just marketing any people that they really wanted to. So this helps us to determine, we need to get rid of those people that you're marketing to, which are sleeping and which are dead, quite frankly. We need to start to focus more on these types of people here and start to think maybe there's some intervention we can do. But then to respond to that other question, how much money are you leaving on the table? We did this by a transactional value and forecasting through a lifetime value scenario, which basically said to us, hey, why are you marketed to these guys? They're not going to give you much, but you've got a really good VIP candidate base who are currently sliding, who are drifting. What you need to do is you need to understand what made the VIPs become VIPs. And can you start to move these people up the quadrant into the VIPs and bring the next people in there so we can start to get that funnel going, get the investments, talk to them personally, and apply, simple email campaigns where you when you open your email, that switches to you because it's personalized content to what you are looking at. So we started analyzing the messages of how did people get into a VIP basis? What messaging, what content, what interventions did we apply? So we started to even get granular with buckets. And over time, if you think that, this wasn't, it was stark when the board saw that amount of money just being left on the table, obviously they're going to shriek. They're going to think, hang on, how do you know? So let's start testing it. So what we started to do was we started to build up both the defensive and offensive. So we established the data board. They didn't have anybody there. They didn't really have any executive oversight in that data board. So going from, nothing to establishing a bunch of executives and some board people on that data board really helped drive out what they wanted to do in terms of business strategy and objectives. Started to build a business data model. Now, it's just about how the business operates. It's the key domains of that business and the key entities, and then applying some kind of data ownership and data stewardship around that, really getting our hands around. Now, one thing I struggle with, I think, is the data ownership piece, because then people get siloed again. But if we start to build that out and maybe go to a different model, and that's what the business data model does, it helps you look at the flows of data across business processes and really helps data owners to see the data I've got absolutely impacts that lineage from where it comes in from and where it goes to, whether that goes into a system, whether it goes to finance, whether it goes out into a dashboard, whether it goes out into a customer app. This is what we need to prove the value of, and to make sure that lineage is really good in terms of quality. And then, setting up those data governance policies, they didn't have anything. So really thinking about how you can drive that out, but also privacy doesn't mean it's a defensive. It could equally be offensive as well, as we're trying to think about insight monetization and really proving out the value of what those customers wanted to do. On the offensive side, creating a roadmap of monetization. Now, this sounds really strange, right? But actually, when they've got 150 magazine titles and only 10 to 20% of those are doing well, what about the other magazine titles? Why don't we start to understand and uncover what the issues are with them, And so we started to look at those titles, and we started to uncover the data issues there. And so as we're starting to build up that monetization view, we're starting to say, okay, this segment of customers who typically have bought these magazines, they don't, we need to start emailing them. We need to start understanding what they need to buy. We need to start to have different conversations with them, but the data isn't ready because the quality is bad. So how do we start to use that as a stepping stone while we're thinking about the campaigns and getting on the offensive foot? We need to bring in good quality. So let's look at a modular way that we can start to build up the good data and quality, and not just build that up over time and over 6 months, but really look at the use case and say, right, now we're going to apply this bit of data because we've started to use that over in another area. So we're always stepping on the use case, the data, and building out that data for cross-use case purposes, not just saying we're going to have analytical debt because we're building out this new analytics product or algorithm, and we're only going to apply this data to it, and then we're going to we're going to build something else, and we're going to take that same data but rebuild it. Well, why would we? Because we've got data already. So we start to reuse, we start to reapply them. That's also the value aspect that we want to get out from this. So also embedding the idea of for marketing to really understand the ROI of their campaigns. They were at a very low ebb in terms of their campaign conversions. So just taking them to even a 10% to 12%. In one campaign, we measured, we got 42% conversion, which actually put almost £650,000 on their books. So it's quite amazing what you can do with this stuff, but you've got to have the foundational elements, and you've got to have the culture in place, and you've got to have those people who are really driving out the aspects of change, mindset shift, working in a different way, and being able to absolutely identify an enterprise-wide data strategy, which helps break down those silos, and really helps to see where data goes across that value chain. And I haven't talked about technology at all. What I've done is I've talked about the business side or achieving those goals and really driving out new mindsets to shift people into thinking why they need to do that, why they need to speak the same language, why they need to think of the data and the business and the IT teams as a collaborative team and not these sort of people who are sitting in different silos. So hopefully that gives you an insight into proof of value, aligning it to your data strategy, getting the business on board, understanding what types of questions and decisions, and really honing down to what you need to do and get to, and drive out those strategic objectives. So I think I've come to the end of this, and thank you so much for being patient. I know that some questions have been coming in, and I'm sure Moisés will be able to put those to me. But thank you very much for your attention, and I hope that we can then get into the panel and have some good conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Samir. I think that, as we are tight of time, a bit rushed. Probably,
okay.
In the meantime that we follow with the panel, I think that you could answer the question that we have received.
Perfect.
Brilliant explanation and ideas around data strategy. I think that I've read some of the questions. I think that they are very, very interesting to go. So you may, I want to introduce Iván Herrero, that is going to be the moderator of the panel that we are taking now. Iván currently serves as the Chief Data Officer of Intercorp, a Peruvian corporation operating in retail, entertainment, finance, education, and healthcare, leading the data and analytics strategy worldwide. Before joining Intercorp, Iván was the head of data and analytics at Everest, Colombia, now called Entity Data, as we all probably know, and worked at Deloitte in Spain and Colombia as senior manager of digital strategy. Iván is a telecommunications engineer and holds a master's degree in business intelligence and big data, as well as a specialization in data visualization. And in 2020, Iván Herrero was recognized as a global ambassador of the prestigious MIT CDO IQ and the Symposium and the CDO magazine, and was elected president of CDO Latam, a brotherhood organization that we all know, and a non-profit organization which tries to foster the strategic use of data and analytics across Latin America. Iván, it's a whole pleasure to have you in here. So thank you very much to be with us and share your experiences and your learnings. And please take the microphone, present the others, and very, very luck for this panel.
Thank you, Moisés. It is my pleasure to be here with you today and to conduct a discussion panel like this with Samir Sharma, which I well know for previous interactions we've been having, and Miguel, Portugal, and Nogueira. Just please give me a couple of minutes to introduce them. Antonio Nogueira is the Chief Data Officer of NOS, the co-leader of 5G in Portugal. With 20 years of experience in data transformation in different industries, Antonio is leading the NOS data strategy transformation journey, supported in a data mesh. Antonio, good morning here in Latin America.
Good morning, all.
There in Europe.
Nice to meet you all. Yeah, nice to meet you all. I think we will have a great conversation on data strategy. Samir, congratulations for your strategy presentation delivery. It was great.
Thanks, Antonio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
And we also have Miguel Portugal with us. Miguel Portugal is a systems engineer with a master's in information technology, with more than 20 years of blended business and IT background, leading business transformation programs supported by latest data trends. Miguel has held leadership positions with regional and global responsibility for renowned multinational corporations in the consumer goods, pharma, and health industries. Miguel, good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Iván. Thank you very much for having me here. It's my pleasure. I'm really honored to share some thoughts with the panel. And again, Samir, congratulations for the presentation as well.
Okay, so let's get started with some thoughts about what Samir just told us. I don't know if you have some reaction, something that especially resonated to you, or maybe something you're very agree with that, or maybe something you're not so, you don't agree so much with Samir.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. If you want me, I can start.
Sure.
Yeah, well, I think the way that Samir has framed this is in a very beautiful way, because it really encompasses different components. And I would like to start by having a conversation on what the definition for data strategy is, right? So when we talk about data strategy, what we are talking about is our strategic framework on how to leverage value for our company based on data, but at scale, right? So it's not something that we just do once in isolated way, but we can repeat that to be industrialized. So from that perspective, when we talk about leveraging business value, is what we are talking the offensive way from Samir, right? So we need to really think about what's in it there, what's in it for the business, and what the values for them. But when we talk about scale, it's when we're talking about the defensive part. The defensive part is how we get readiness behind to really make this sustainable and not just one shot, right? So I really want to maybe complement the concept that Samir has framed in the way that how we can deploy this model, right? Because it's really complex, as Samir has perfectly commented, and maybe an analogy can work on this. So if you think about implementing, or you want to build your car, if you start by putting the tires and then the chassis and then you get the car, by the time that you get the car, maybe the business requirement will not be longer valid, right? So that's what we need to avoid. So implementing this data model is going to be like, maybe you have your skate, you have your scooter, then you have your bicycle, you get your bike, and then you get your car, right? So you start delivering value, you start using it, you start learning, and you start capturing value from business. So I really like the way that Samir has framed, and just complementing some thoughts on that I think are relevant for this purpose.
Thank you, Miguel. So I think I'd just like to highlight two words, probably: value, scalability, and bringing value iteratively. So you don't want to go for the big bang. You want to build value step by step. Antonio,
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I was listening to Samir, and I was just coming from an internal discussion very similar to what we of this conversation, and we were precisely discussing why our data is strategic. And I think you have a data strategy because your business wants to deliver value with data. The data is something that can be distinctive. I mean, you can use your data to be different from your competition, to be creating, you can use data to help create different products on different business contexts. So in that sense, data is really strategic. So everybody says, or I listen to most of the people saying that, okay, for us, data is strategic, but they don't treat data as a strategic asset in their companies because, well, I mean, they treat different assets as strategic, but data is not seen in your, for instance, in your risk framework or in your business framework. You don't see data there. So our discussion was really on top of what Samir was saying is a data strategy is to define how we want to organize our data so we can create value with that. We can use how we will use data to add value to our business. And then, yeah, we can have a defensive and an offensive approach. I think, as Samir was saying, I think it depends on the moment where you are. but you think you should consider both. The quantity of that will depend on your maturity, but I think for starters, I think the most the 2 points that I want to frame are exactly these ones. The data should be, a data strategy is based on seeing data and treating data as a strategic asset, and then your strategy is something that you should execute. I mean, it's not something that you state in PowerPoint and the PowerPoint stays forever and nobody will see that. It's something that you should create that should be very aligned with the execution and with actions and with goals and with measurements and with the continuous improvement. And that's how I see data strategy for now.
So that is, I mean, Miguel and Antonio, I think you've hit the nails on the head in both of your responses. I think the first thing that I see is why don't people treat data as a strategic asset? Because quite frankly, everybody's running. Now, to go back to your point, Miguel, I recently spoke to a CFO who's one of our clients in the US, and he said to me, look, what we're going to be doing with this data strategy is basically helping you to form out what we need to do for the business in order to help them be successful. So he looked at me and said, okay, so, but we've had, he said this to me, we've had some other big, big consultancies in, and I don't want to be left with, a 500-page PowerPoint. I said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to help you crawl, we're going to help you walk, and we're going to help you run, right? And this is where it goes back to Ivan's point about the big bang approach. The issue that I've got on a number of factors is we get totally embedded in the technology equation, and we move too far to the technology side to remember what we're trying to do with the business. And therefore the business is thinking, well, it's just a technology project. And therefore ownership of that, or understanding of why the asset should be a strategic asset, is lost. So where I think we should be trying to move organizations, as I'm sure all of you are, is to say to the business, look, the onus is on the data organization, or in your area, Miguel, in the IT organization, to deliver, right? But from the IT organization, we deliver data to a point because we make sure it's secure, we make sure it's stored well, we make sure it's transformed, we've applied the business rules, etc. But then you need to start to understand how that's going to be transformed into value, right? But is that essentially the IT people? Probably not, right? It's the business people who need to drive that. Now, there's another component there, which is the data or the analytics organization that is trying to find insight, that's trying to do something. But the problem that I see is, the glue between the IT, the analytics, and the business type organizations are lost, primarily because nothing hangs off what the business is attempting to achieve, and therefore we get this sort of miscommunication between everybody. Well, I thought you were doing that. No, I thought you were doing that. I thought I was doing that. Well, it's your responsibility. So the responsibility for data in terms of the value from that data must lie with the business users, right? Must lie with the business. But we must provide them the way, the approach, the mechanisms. And we must all, as data practitioners, and here's the big issue that I also see, data practitioners live in their heads, right? I'm a data nerd. I really am, okay? I could sit there and talk to somebody about technology stuff, even though I'm not a deep technologist, but I really love it. I sit and listen to my data engineers and architects talking about data all the time. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. I wish I could really get my head around this, but I'm in the business world. So I think as data practitioners, we need to be more business fluent, okay? This is the bit where I think we lose the dynamic of how we are working within the business context. We should be business focused first, data focused second, technology focused third. And I think I'd just like to throw that out to you to see whether that is something that is difficult to actually do in your organizations, given that organizations are built on silos. There's another thing, right? But data flows right across it. So, I think these are the things that I'd like to throw out to you. How are you absolutely attempting to change that narrative and to drive out those different ways of working? I mean, I know how we do it with our clients, but this is even more fascinating. I've got three, very prominent guys in the room that we can, really try to get some answers from. Antonio is laughing the most.
Well, I understand completely what you are saying. We started to, in our data strategy, we started to by delivering or by thinking about our engagement model with the business, because I think it's what makes the difference. We talk about data and we talk about technologies on this area, but is always something missing. And I think the most, there is a relevant part that is the collaboration design. And how do you engage people from different areas, and how do you break silos? You should have good training on emotional intelligence also, and you should have you should be prepared for different kind of people and for different kind of ways of working. But I think what we are seeing, at NOS we are implementing a data mesh model exactly, and one of the reasons to do it is because it was a great fit for this engagement model, where we have different business areas want to build their products, they know they have autonomy, they have skills, but they don't know how to use them the best way, in a governance way, and they don't they do ownership tasks, but they don't have the responsibility. So we are defining a new engagement model with them, and I think it's working well. We are piloting that, and we are seeing that this is the best way to do it, because we bring our expertise, they bring their business expertise, and then we design a collaborative way of working based on agile methodologies that we are also implementing, and we are and that is driven by business value. So the product value is incremental, as Miguel was saying. We are doing the skates, and then the bicycle, and then the car, and I think it's the best way to, it's a good vehicle to bring our data strategy to the business, because we are understanding better what are their needs. We are understanding better the business. We are getting business knowledge, let's say like that, and at the same time we are doing it in a way that can execute our strategy. It's how we are doing.
Miguel, from an IT focus, how do you embed the principles? Because what Antonio talked about is very much that data mesh, data fabric kind of organization, which I still find from a governance perspective is difficult to embed, with true data product owners or product owners. And from an IT organization then that you're delivering, how do you tend to drive that, that sort of business uptake, the asset that should be valued but isn't, and traditionally, as an IT organization, what's important for you?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex equation because, as you have mentioned, there are different skills, right? So you have the people from the business. You need to know your business, absolutely. There's people with strong and advanced data capabilities, and then you have the IT people, the traditional IT people. And I think this is where the operating model really is key in order to enable this capability in an enterprise, right? Because you really need to know how to mix those skills and that knowledge in order to produce the best outputs, right? And the important thing from my point of view is that you really need to start thinking about the business value. So when we talk about that people is not really treating data as a strategic asset, or it's not really, we are not having the right conversations. That's, from my point of view, that's because you don't really are having value conversations based on data. And this is where, as I repeat my example, you really need to follow the steps. You really need to crawl, walk, and run in order to show the value and then create the momentum, right? Because if you don't get to this point, then what you are going to get is a lot of effort, a lot of waste, a lot of frustration for the team, and not really achieving and making some step and some milestones in your journey, right? So it's really focused to center the conversation on value. It's really important to focus the conversation on outputs and create and maintain this discipline in the organization, right?
So we were actually talking about transforming our organizations here. So yeah, and it's not easy, as Miguel just said. We have to show value, and then we have to build up a new operating model, bring people from different backgrounds, different skill sets, different knowledge, and have them talk together in a language that probably they don't really share. So how to start it? How to start sparking those conversations with people that don't really probably share the same language at the beginning? I don't know, Antonio, you've faced that challenge. Yeah, okay, you bring people to the same room, and it's like someone is speaking English and the other one is speaking German, and nobody understands what they're talking about. And that's very risky. If you don't handle it well, this can very soon like explode and fail.
Well, I can share my experience. I am relatively new at NOS. I'm here in 6 months. So I had to do that. I had to grab all guys in a room, and then okay guys, let's talk about data. And we've done that, and then you see you know people, you see people that are more available to change and to transformation, others that want to stay in the silo. So you have to have a good well, first of all, you need to have some help if you want, or coaching with someone that has experience in this field, so they can help you establish what will be your business data personas, you know, the ones that you should engage first, the ones that are early adopters in your organization, and the others that you should talk later on. So yes, it's not an easy, you know, at the end of the day, it's well, I can give you give you, let's say, my 3 challenges. The first one is people. You know, it's how you deal with people, and how you bring people to a data transformation. The second one is, I think, empowerment and investment from top layers and from the business, from the business stakeholders, and I'm very lucky on that, because I have that, and it's not. It's usually it is a challenge in my company. It's not, everyone is I am very empowered by the board to make this happen. And then I think following one of the questions that I'm seeing, it's the transition and the transition process from what you have today to what you need to build. So it's not about, okay, let's forget what we have now, what we did in the past, and then let's do something completely new. Yes, of course, we will be doing something new and with new tools and with new responsibilities and roles and operating models. But I think we should also accept that we have good lessons learned, that we have in-house great people that know the data, where the data is, and where. If you ask someone where is that specific field, you will find someone that knows exactly in what system that is. So there is this transition challenge, and how you do the transition is also very challenging. And what we are doing in our model is we are building products, and we are decomposing products in subcomponents and in autonomous pieces, so we can treat each piece autonomously, and we transit and we move that piece to the new ecosystem in an incremental way. So I think these are the three, if I can, what I can recall now in my mind, the three main challenges: people, empowerment, and the transition. It's my opinion.
Great thoughts, Antonio. And you remember me of someone I listened to a couple of weeks ago. He was a speaker at the CDO Latam Summit, and he said, for me, there are three problems when we are trying to deploy a data analytics strategy. The first one is people, the second one is people, and the third one is people.
And there is a fourth one as well, right?
and I think we're all facing those three problems, additionally to the other two that you very
because it's something that you cannot control. You can control a data governance framework and strategy. You can control technology somehow, but people, it's more difficult. So you need to have good skills and help on that also.
And you cannot control people, and you cannot buy people. So every other thing you can buy somehow.
You know, I think it's an important aspect though, because one, and I'll give you an example. There was one of our clients. I walked into a meeting one day, and there's a fairly big logistics client, and on one side of the room there was the data architects, the data scientists, the analysts. And on the other side of the room, there was all the commercial teams. So what would be termed as the customer commercial team and the operational commercial team. So they were, just keeping it that high level. And when I walked in, and I was, it was the early days when I was, when I'd formed the business, and this was back in 2015. And they were all speaking a completely different language to each other. One side was saying, oh, we've got to put in, better physical data models and blah, blah, blah. We've got to really, stitch everything. We've got to normalize data, blah, blah. I mean, all of this, the stuff that you would expect to hear. We've got to have better classification algorithms. Oh, I can do that with the next best offer. And you got these business people saying, we just want the data. We just want this. We want that. We want, we want to drive our business. And I thought to myself, what the hell is going on here? And I still find that in many, many places, right? So the thing is, when I came out, I actually, I took a risk, right? Because I said, okay, guys, stop. No one's getting anywhere. And they all looked at me and said, who is this guy? Some, external companies come in to tell us what to do. And I said, no, I'm not telling you what to do. I just don't think this is going to get us anywhere. So I said, look, let's abandon this meeting. Let's come back tomorrow. So I walked out there thinking, what have I done? So I thought to myself, there must be a better way of doing this. So I walked away. I walked out. I booked a room in the client's office. And I literally, I was furiously mapping out what we needed to do. And I went back the next day. I said, guys, this is where we need to go to. We need to have this type of language set. We need to be able to engage each other on this level. And I drew a model up, which I basically have evolved to this point, which is what I call the data strategy canvas, which helps people really articulate their thoughts, very much design thinking led approach, which is really looking at it from the context of business, and then applying the fabric of whatever you want to apply, you know, data lens on top of it, or a technology lens, or a transformation lens, or a cultural lens, but absolutely starting with this really fresh type of canvas that one can just say, hey, let's put it up on the wall. Let's see what we're trying to achieve. Let's look at the kind of customers that we're trying to get to. Let's think about the business questions that we want to you know, ask ourselves, and what we're going to do. And then, you know, what we can ask ourselves, well, what value propositions are we going to build from that? You know, and it's almost mapping it in such a way that it's so business driven that even a data person can do it, because they actually do think like that, right? But they just don't speak like that, which is what I'm trying to, I've over the years tried to get my teams to stop thinking, stop speaking technically and thinking business wise. So it's a very dynamic change. But actually, if you get, and it goes back to both points, what Miguel said, Iván and Antonio, if you have that right engagement approach with the people across the business and you give them that coaching, you're available to understand that the language, you know, changes in some way, but actually if you help adopt different practices, whether that is a design thinking workshop, whether that is driving it from a very, you know, instead of actually talking about data or technology, let's literally step back and see what the biggest issue is here. What are we trying to achieve in terms of outlay, you know, in terms of revenue figures, and then work backwards to how you can do that through an algorithm or whatever it might be. But don't start with the algorithm first and then think how we get to the revenue target, because that doesn't help, you know. So I think these different engagement approaches are so key. I've seen it from building out centers of excellences to building out hub and spoke models based on maturity to driving out consulting organizations. It just doesn't, you know, we've really got to go back and step back and say, how do we fundamentally speak as an organization? And we know that data is always going to be the glue that really does bring it all together, whether it's digital transformation, whether it's, you know, finance transformation, whether it's any kind of transformation. What comes out of that, the end, as an end product, is data. But we focus too much on data. That's what we do it's too much. And I think we've got to stop that narrative. If it's data, because everybody's hearing data is the new oil. You know, I'm sick of that kind of conundrum. You know, that it's just because then everybody thinks that you can do it in 5 minutes. We can provide value in half an hour. And, you know, there you go. We've done it. Data's just changed everything. But it's a big endeavor. You know, the easy thing, I tell you what's easy. In some ways, technology is probably easy, right? The hard stuff is the soft stuff that we're talking about. You know, the cultural change, the barriers to change on that. And it's not about people don't change. I also hate to hear, oh, people don't change. People change every day. We are change. You know, we have to change every day. So I think that, you know, we need to start firing up the principles of a practice of change, a practice of language adoption, and a practice of really uncovering what, you know, maybe Antonio said, emotional intelligence, you know, and also the mix of people. We've started to bring in people in the organization who have come from a liberal arts background. How do you get a liberal arts background person speaking to a data scientist? Hey, that actually helps, because it helps the data scientist to see things completely differently, you know, in a non-biased fashion, bringing in different equations that you want to get, driving out different outcomes. And I think these are the kinds of things that we need to bring in to a mixture of teams, to go back to how we must work outside of this data context and really driving out value. I think it's got to be a change in the way that we think about it.
Yeah. Just to complement on that. Sorry,
go ahead, Miguel, please.
Yeah, I think the reason why I believe this is quite complex is because it's not really a technical issue, right? When technical issues have a non-solution, right?
Exactly.
In this case, it's more adaptive. So you need to really find out what really is best for you. And as an adaptive issue, you need to go through the process. You need to really learn, you really need to improve, and you really need to fix the tools that are really working for you and finding out your way, your own way, right?
Yeah.
So, and once you have that clear, what you need to really need to do is you really need to put in place your operating model. So what your aspiration is, because you can have a data strategy that it's really mainly focused on running your business, which basically is about treating data as an asset or putting the right process in place, right? But then you can have an uplift and put your operating model focus on the service, where you will enhance your business performance, right? So, and you will start enabling some additional value.
Yeah.
But on the last mile, what you can do is you can really your operating model more on value, more on innovation, where you will really put some differentiated value for the business, right? So the level of your aspiration will define what the level of your effort is behind. And as I said at the beginning, there is no answer for that. So you need to find out where, go through the process, learn, fix, and improve.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the challenge, because I completely agree with you, Miguel, that we have to align the expectations of stakeholders, because normally, and I don't really know why, but we data people are expected to bring value, like if we had like some kind of magic in ourselves to come here and bring me value, but I don't even have access to the data. This is a completely mess. How to manage those higher than normal expectations, but also facing a very bad starting point. So you have to keep traction. You don't want to say, okay, this is going to take a long time, but they have to know that this is something complex. It's complex on the technology and data side. It is more complex on the people side, but it's a hard endeavor, as Samir said. How do you manage to align those expectations and buy time? Probably, especially at the beginning, at the first, I would say 6 to 12 months, are very, and I talk from my own experience, there's a lot of anxiety from everyone and from us. Like, I want to prove value. I know I have to prove value, and I know it's going to take time, and I have to ensure I have the time enough to prove the value, to start getting traction. But how do you manage to set up the expectations and then win the time and patience, to buy the time and patience you need to get to the point that this all start getting traction and showing value, and so get the ball rolling. Antonio, you've spent just 6 months in NOS. Have you experienced this anxiety during the last months?
Yeah, look, just to follow Miguel, well, on the running the business, service level improvement or innovation, our strategy is for all of that. Our data strategy is to enable that. So we are you can have a data strategy focused on those challenges. Our data strategy is basically to be the enabler to others do that. So it's from my side, it's also a very interesting point where you can apply the data strategy. Again, keep in mind that we are discussing data strategy in a DAMA event here in Portugal. We can say, I don't know how it is in Peru, but on our side of things, everybody talks about everybody talks more about data technology than data. Okay,
yeah.
Everyone is more worried about on the engineering side of things than on the data side of things, and that is also something that we are trying to cover in our strategy. We call it, we are putting it in our culture pillar, because we need to bring DAMA, things like DAMA wheel and other frameworks to the conversation on data, for different aspects, because you need to organize your data, you need to know your data, you need to, well, you know, garbage in, garbage out, and then you have a data governance problem. So it's very interesting to also to say that in here in our country, in Portugal, we are not discussing data technology, we are discussing data as data governance as a discipline, and that is also very interesting here at NOS. Then the journey, the data strategy is a journey, Ivan. So it's well, it's a program. We have a program. We are starting executing our strategy. Yes, we are seeing lots of anxiety, but well, nowadays we have different tools and accelerators. For instance, the cloud is a great help if you want to accelerate technology on data. But you have different challenges that I was just speaking on, people and on cultural data governance needs, because data governance is not seen as a very sexy topic here. Everyone looks at data governance as a burden or something that is that will stay at the end of the line. But usually, when you are not delivering value in your silos, usually is because you don't have foundations. So it's also a journey to include in the data strategy here in my country that discipline and making the stakeholders understand why we should have common data models, common data concepts, reusage of data, synergies captured on everybody using the same data sets. So it looks like it's a very simple way, simple topics, but when you go to the field and you try to implement and make people using it, it's a different scenario. So that has been my experience in the last 6 months. We are
No, I was going to respond to something actually, because this whole data governance thing is really interesting for me, Antonio.
Go for it.
Yeah, and data governance at large has never been this, as you said, the sexiest beast in the room, right? It's always been the new shiny toy that's sitting over in the corner that we can, play with forever and ever. But here's the thing: I think a lot of companies start data governance, but they don't know how to get value out of it. And because they don't know how to get the value out of it, they normally just say, let's not bother, it's too hard. Even if they do set up forums or boards or whatever, they don't continue to do that. The reason is because I think what I've seen in the experiences that I've had are, they're not linking it to a prioritized view of where they need to get to. They may have a view that this week or this month or whatever, this is important, but that's a reactional type of view. Yeah. Yes, there is there is always going to be a change, but business doesn't change like that overnight. Business takes a little bit of time to change. The other thing is people try to be so enforced with data governance that the business back off. So one of the things that I tend to do and you saw data governance very much part of the whole dual data strategy, is I don't even term it as data governance. Now, Dharma will shoot me for that because, it's, with their wheel of 15 spokes, obviously data governance is, the Dharma wheel is big, which I get, right? Companies don't typically look at it that way. Yeah. And I think this is part and parcel of where we also need to move, I think, with data governance. If we can link, say, a use case to a specific governing, strategy or a set of data to the thing that we're going to build. So we're now starting to layer it in, and then people can start to understand. So it's not just about a stream of data governance that we must, have data quality and, we must try and back away from that whole concept of data governance by enforcement. We must do data governance by stealth. And this is what business people do not need to see. Business people do not care about data governance. Let's face it, right? But if we do it by stealth, they won't even know we're doing data governance.
We're having a very similar approach to that. We don't talk about data governance at Intercorp because it is so hard to explain and so hard to understand and so hard to prove the value that I made the decision to just let's talk about the value we are providing and let's and we know it's important to have good data governance strategy, but we're just it is for us just a way to do things, so it's in a sustainable way. So when we are deploying a data project in any flavor we can find, we try to do it on a proper manner, even if it takes us more time. So we ensure we have this data governance platform we've built on our own, and we ensure we document metadata, and we have all the business glossary and the data catalog in place. So we have all the good practices of data ops as part of how we do data projects. So it is not something that we can decouple from the project. It is just the way that we do a project, and if the project doesn't include these good best practices of data governance, it is not concluded. So yeah, I think we're all trying to find our way to deploy this data governance with the less friction possible with the business. I don't know, Miguel, if you have any other tip.
I think just complementing what you guys have just mentioned, I think the data governance is a big issue, mainly because the business or the different parties are not really well educated or mature enough on the components of data strategy, or because they don't see the value, right? Because I can be knowledgeable, but if I don't see the value, I will not be supported, right? And I think that the old approach where you have a mature requirement and you have all the data that you need is the perfect area, right? So that's very theoretical. In reality, what you really need to do is you really prioritize use cases. You need to help the business discover what's behind that, what the value is. And then once you get the value, you industrialize, right? And once you industrialize, you start doing continuous improvement. So this whole thing again comes back to capability development in the organization, right? So it's a really new approach. Make it based on use cases, learn, improve, and then go to the next stage, right?
I absolutely. Sorry.
Samir,
no, go ahead.
Yes, I would like to ask if you have some kind of data fluency program in your organizations to help business people understand the complexity of the technical stuff, and to help technical people understand have a better understanding of the business needs and how we should talk together and work together in order to bring value for the business. I don't know, Antonio, if you have something like that at NOS.
Yes, but I will return to the data governance issue because I have a different.
There's no way of getting away from that one, is there?
Hey, go ahead.
Well, guys, I've been spending my last years trying to make board members understand the value of data governance. Okay, so I think the easiest way to talk about it is, well, let's consider your data as money. Do you want to know the money you have in your company or not? So if you consider data as your some as an asset that you value. So we need to make people understand where the data is. And if you do that, we try to, well, I've done it when I arrive here, and we have like, we know like 10% of our data. So there is 90% of data that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't know, we are not bringing any value of that data. And the data that we know, we don't know the quality of the data that we have. So
mm-hmm.
it's fake money, you know. So I think the data governance part is where you say, okay, if you know all the data that you have, imagine the value that you can explore. You will have hundreds of things to explore. And then when you know it, and if you work on the quality and the the quality that asset has, that will enhance and that will scale the value that you can bring with data. And the third part is, well, it's where it's the more easiest part. You don't want your money stolen, right? So let's go privacy. So,
but you know, Antonio, that's a very good point, because going back to your board discussion, you can clearly link back to very key moments in data history, let's call it. You know, for example, Caesar's Palace. I don't know whether you know that in 2015, Caesar's was going into liquidation. This is a true story, absolutely true. The auditors came in and they looked at the buildings, they looked at all the assets, everything like that, you know, and they said, okay, fine, maybe we can rescue something. Then they found this team of about 200 people. These guys who were looking at the customer loyalty program, they were, you know, they started off from a very, very small team of about 10, grown to about 250 over about 17 years or something. But they were doing some really amazing things just to understand the customer, their behaviors and so on. They absolutely understood the value in that data and valued what they were doing at $1 billion, which was more than all of the assets taken in total. So they said, don't care about those assets. Let's retain this piece, and then we can build on it. So you see, I mean, it's an intangible thing. Some of the airlines, while they were, you know, in the pandemic, used the valuation of their data assets to drive, you know, loans and so on. You know, Southwest Airlines. I mean, these are the kinds of things that people should be thinking about. Companies should be thinking about. This is not an intangible asset. You know, this is something, okay, it's not on the balance sheet right now. Maybe it never will be, but this is a vehicle to absolutely driving out, you know, a huge amount of value throughout your organization. Do you think private equity companies or, you know, are going around buying organizations not valuing data? You know, now they're doing data diligence and absolutely valuing the asset that asset class that is available to them. You know, and in a way they can see, is the customer data absolutely essential? What kind of quality is in that customer data? You know, how much value are we generating right now, as opposed to what we could generate if we start to build our practices and get better at data. So it's a massive value in data. I don't see why. You know, these are the kinds of things that we should be showing and shouting about, you know, to board members who are just still at, you know, do we do AI? You know, that doesn't make sense to me. You know, it's again, it's, you know, so I think, you know, Antonio, it's very important to go that top down. I see too many companies doing bottom up approaches. It just doesn't work. Unfortunately, that just does not work. You know, top down needs to meet the bottom up, but top down needs to be driven first throughout all of this data strategy. In the data strategy context, it must be done that way, and they must understand the value. Even just looking at customer data and saying, you know, we need more of this, but we don't have enough data because we don't collect this type of data. And if we collected that type of data, that would give us X. So it's a huge difference. You know, so switching to more of that business sense of valuation rather than just saying data governance. Governance can come, but actually putting that label on it and that value is key, really key to starting off, you know, getting some pull-in from the people up top. I think we lost a few people, Iván.
Yes, it seems so. I don't know why. I think we lost Miguel.
Yes.
I cannot see Antonio, but
yeah.
Anyway, we have like 5 minutes left, and we have some questions from the audience. Here, I have one I would like to ask you, Samir, and it's about how to engage business users today, so they can migrate from traditional source systems like the traditional BI. There's Miguel. To Miguel, this is for you. This is a question from the audience, and Jorge said, how to engage business users so they can migrate from traditional source systems like or traditional BI systems to a data lake.
Yeah.
How to have them change and the way and the tools they've been using for so long to these new technologies that
yeah. Well, what I can say from that is I think we are having the wrong question from my point of view, because we are again putting technology up front, right? So it should be what's the value that you are getting today with the traditional approach, and what's the value that you can get from your business perspective using the right technology, right? So the technology goes behind that. So I don't really like having conversation with the business where you put up front the technology and say, okay, you need to use not traditional data warehouse, but now data lake with brand X. I think you need to say the capabilities that you can enable or that you are able to use today are this, and the capabilities that you can do to get your business results now with this technology is this, right? I think that's the kind of conversation we should be leading.
I agree with you, Miguel. I really do. I think that's the most sensible thing that I've heard from an IT leader in a long time. I think that's a very, very sensible approach. Sorry to brand all IT leaders in that way, but I'm telling you, that's fantastic. I wish there were more like you who would have that response, and instead of go straight into diving into a data lake or a data lake house or whatever we need to procure. I think you're right. You know, we need to really step away from this, and it's been happening over. Not to say that it's still. I think it's moving. I think things are changing. People are getting a little bit more savvy to the fact that we can have all the technology in the world, but if we don't have the outcome, then there's no point. But to just have bridge those conversations in the way that you have just put in that context is the right way. It's the wrong question. You know, it should be business motivated and looked at from what are you trying to achieve? And if you ask that question, the onus is put back on the business to say, well, actually, we're trying to achieve X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, what kind of data do we need to do that? Then, you know, and where is that? Could be external, could be internal, could be, you know, with a partner, could be with a third party, it could be anywhere. And I often look at this as a value chain, you know, so just looking at the value chain of the ecosystem is important, because then that will drive whether we're going to stay on premise or we're going to go cloud or we're going to go hybrid, you know, and again, cloud is not cheap. Everybody has this huge thing about saying, oh, cloud is cheap. Oh, we must all go to the cloud. It ain't cheap. You know, it comes with its big cost. And that's the other thing that people need to know. So
it gives you flexibility, but
scalability, absolutely.
Not necessarily it is going to be cheaper than on-premise.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've really enjoyed talking to you guys, Samir, Miguel, Antonio. It's been a pleasure to conduct this discussion panel. I'm afraid we only have 1 hour to talk about these times, about these topics. I think we could stay for all the day talking about these interesting topics, but I can hear Moisés knocking on the door because the time is over.
All right. I said it's been an amazing panel. I think that data strategy, as you have said, it is about people, it is about data, it is about technology, it is about business. Challenges are everywhere over there. I think that some conclusions that you have been talking about are the day-to-day, no? For many organizations, this is not an easy way. It has not any shortcut. So it has, it takes time, and you need to convince, you need to get people believe about what data is capable of. So it is not a 1 day or 1 year even track. So thank you. I'd like to thank you all. For me, it's been a pleasure, and representing DAMA Peru, it's been an honor. I hope to see you soon again, where at any DAMA Peru event or over there. Hopefully in the future in presence, no, it will be even more interesting and more friendly for all of us. But by the moment, I'd like again to thank you all, and just give the last words to conclude the DAMA Peru week. That it's been the last event, the last panel, and thank you all again.
Pleasure. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations for the demo week. Great job.
Thank you.
5 days. Wow.
Hopefully it will be a DAMA Peru week in the following year. So, and hopefully it could be interesting to have both in presence and online. So if you, Samir or Antonio, have not ever been in Peru, I think it could be a beautiful time to go and visit that amazing country.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Spanish, para toda la comunidad, volver a daros las gracias a todos. Ha sido nuestra primera DAMA Perú Week. Creemos que ha sido una semana llena de diferentes aprendizajes. Hemos intentado proponer una oferta variada de referentes internacionales. Empezamos la semana con Peter Aiken, presidente de DAMA Internacional, dando una masterclass también bastante interesante sobre estrategia de datos. Tuvimos un par de días que por motivos un poco logísticos tuvimos que restringir el acceso solo a miembros de la comunidad DAMA Perú, a los cuales pues por supuesto invitamos a estar cerca, a estar en contacto, y a quien le pique la curiosidad pues solicitar una membresía. Y bueno, yo creo que el panel de ayer sobre la importancia del dato en la educación, en la cultura del dato, fue súper relevante, súper interesante el ver cómo la actualidad está cambiando desde la educación más básica hasta la universitaria. Y bueno, pues hoy hemos disfrutado de un magnífico panel con unos panelistas de primera talla mundial, y desde DAMA Perú simplemente daros las gracias a todos, porque esto al final solo es posible con vosotros. Esperamos seguir teniendo gran participación y un año 2022 provechoso. Y de nuevo, daros las gracias a todos, a nuestros patrocinadores, por supuesto, que sin ellos esto tampoco sería posible: Power Data, la Universidad Continental, la UTP. Y bueno, poco más, simplemente estamos en contacto. Aquellos que ya lo estáis solicitando, tenemos en unos días la promoción Pay If You Pass para sacarnos el CDMP o alguno de los exámenes propios, en este caso Data Governance o Data Quality. Y nada, para cualquier cosa no dudéis en contactar con el equipo de DAMA Perú, que para eso estamos. Y como siempre, un placer y muy buena semana. Gracias a todos.